Now we go straight to Uptown Charlotte, where the NASCAR Hall of Fame sits. And joining us is the Executive Director, Winston Kelley, to tell us who the nominees are for this year's Hall of Fame ballot. Winston, welcome. It's always great having you here.
Delighted to be on, and just got our class of 2025 inducted, and the process continues. So we're excited to start that process and talk about the nominees for the class of 2026.
As you look at this and that list has come out, this is the start of the process, right? And this is what comes out, and then the discussions happen from here. Who did we add to the modern era ballot this year?
Yeah, let's talk just a second about the process, because we've got two nominating committees, one that nominates for the modern era ballot and the Landmark Award. That's made up predominantly of NASCAR officials, a couple from the Hall of Fame, and many from the tracks, both the larger tracks and the historic tracks. And then the Pioneer Committee, which is made up largely of living NASCAR Hall of Fame inductees, Landmark winners, and Squire Hall Award winners. So in the modern ballot, and the other thing to remind people is previous nominees don't automatically transfer over. Occasionally somebody has fallen off. This year, no different. Greg Biffle, Neil Bonnet, Jeff Burton, Randy Dorton, Harry Gant, Harry Hyde, and Jack Sprague all were renominated. So to your question on the modern era ballot, Kurt Busch, 2004 Cup Series champion, the 2017 Daytona 500 winner, 34 wins at the Cup Series level, won in all three divisions, is a nominee for the class of 2026. And also Randy LaJoie, two-time Xfinity champion, Busch North Series champion, won 15 races in the Xfinity Series, what is now the Xfinity Series, and one of NASCAR's 75 greatest drivers, was added to that modern era ballot. On the Pioneer ballot, again, Ray Hendrick, one that was carried over, modified standout over the years, Banjo Matthews, everything from a driver, car builder, crew chief, Larry Phillips from the Midwest, five-time All-American Series champion, Bob Welborn, who won 3 Convertible Series championships, and Jake Elder actually returns to the Pioneer ballot. He had been on the ballot in the past, a 3-time Cup Series champion with 44 wins with 9 different drivers. So Jake, the suitcase, as they called him, because he raced with so many different teams, back on the Pioneer ballot. And then finally, last but not least, the Landmark Award, Alvin Hawkins, Lisa France Kennedy, Dr. Joe Mattioli, and Les Richter all return to the Landmark ballot. And Humpy Wheeler, former president and general manager at Charlotte Motor Speedway, who put on so many great pre-race shows, but also he's very instrumental in driver development. Drivers like Dale Earnhardt Sr. got his first start with the help of Humpy Wheeler, as did Janet Guthrie and many others. So short answer to your question, Kurt Busch and Randy LaJoie on the modern ballot, Jake Elder on the Pioneer ballot, and Humpy Wheeler on the Landmark ballot are our new nominees for the class of 2026.
Winston, the one thing that I always love and say about the Hall of Fame is, number one, we get the nominees out there, and then the voting, and then the induction ceremony. It is such a great opportunity for us to relive a lot of history and a lot of the moments. But I really like this, when we look at all of the names on there and we start to research their history and learn about the things that they've done and a lot of things that they've contributed, especially the Pioneer ballot. And I love the way you guys do the nominating for this as well, because we don't ever want to forget our past. And with more than 75 years of history, a lot of people contributed to those early days of it. And to see some of those names, the hardest thing is you only get to pick one from those 5 names on the Pioneer ballot.
That is so true, Brad. And I love our process. And I can say that unabashedly because I had nothing to do with developing it. NASCAR put it together, and it's evolved and tweaked a couple of times over the years, with the addition of the Pioneer ballot a few years ago after having 11 years of just one ballot, and also highlighting the fact that you've got not just Cup Series drivers. You've got so many other people that have contributed mightily, whether it was on the track, off the track, or a little bit of each. And the fact that the people involved in the process, the nominating process, and the voting process are people who have been involved in the sport for 40, 50 years, competitors. You've got people like Richard Petty, Dale Inman, Leonard Wood, Darrell Waltrip, who raced with these pioneers and can say, here's what they contributed that you might not know. And it's just as hard to pick 5 off of that pioneer potential list as it is to pick 1 at the end of the day.
What is the process like? What's it like to be in the room for these? Is it heated debates? Is it discussions? Is it politicking? What's it like?
It's very similar discussion as to what you'll have the rest of your show and the rest of the week about why this person and not that person. The basic difference is it's so respectful. Most people are advocating for somebody, not against somebody. They're talking about, this crew chief had X number of wins, 49 wins, 43 wins, 53 in the case of Tim Brewer, 56 in the case of Harry Hyde. This person did this off the track in addition to on the track. So it's debate, but it's constructive debate. And here's what they did in the sport, and here's what they did for the sport. Not a lot of politicking, but you get some inside perspective of somebody that actually, Darrell Waltrip won a lot of races with Jake Elder. So you get somebody like Darrell, or, if you go back to, when Donnie Allison was nominated, Leonard Wood had raced with him. So, the Pettys raced with and against a Bob Welburn. And so it's more about, here's what you may not have read about this person. Here's what they did. So it's just elevating them to a new level of perspective.
Yeah. And all of these names are deserving of an induction into the NASCAR Hall of Fame. And I can still remember when Buddy Baker received his nomination, and he was still with us at the time. And he said this publicly and said this privately, and he sincerely meant it. He said, I don't know when I'll get in. I feel like I will. I'm just honored to be on the ballot. And, a few years later he was. But, in between his first nomination when he was inducted, the wind blows different ways every year. I mean, you look at a guy like Greg Biffle, a lot of talk about Greg Biffle for his contributions more recently to Western North Carolina and everything that he did with that. You can look at a few years back when the wind was sort of blowing in the way of, man, we've got a lot of legendary car owners who've been doing this for, their whole lives. And we got a lot of great people in, like, Rick Hendrick and Joe Gibbs and Roger Penske and so on and so forth. I'm always fascinated by that as well, Winston. Like, which way does the wind blow with a lot of support for someone for whatever reason, whether it's their contribution on the track to their contribution off the track or whatever they've continued to give back to the sport?
Well, to your point and what Todd asked earlier about in the room, virtually anybody that speaks up, because it's an open mic. Once we just look at some statistics that NASCAR provided, plus whatever you had, it's an open mic in the nominating committee and on the voting process as well. And virtually everybody starts their comments with, okay, we all agree they're all worthy and they're all deserving. Here is why I'm advocating for this person this year. And, you mentioned how the wind blows. There seems to be a pattern of you're wanting different types of people, which when you had 5 people, it might not be uncommon from 2 from the same era. But it's doubtful that you'll see 2 very similar people from the modern ballot go in that are both modern, more recent Cup Series drivers. If you look at last year, they were both Cup Series drivers, but they were essentially from different eras with Ricky Rudd and Carl Edwards. So spreading that out. You'll also have discussions about, okay, if we've got a couple of drivers here, then do you have a car owner or a crew chief rather than a driver? Again, they're all worthy. And I think what was one of the tie-breaking votes or sentiments for Ralph Moody is that he was there earlier than some of the others. So some people prioritize that by, okay, if I can't figure out who did their thing, if you will, as the king would say, back in the earliest days. So, the wind evolves to try to have a diversity of people is what I sense in the voting room.
So how much of this is how much of this whole debate and kind of positioning and advocating happens even in the weeks leading up to getting in the room to have those discussions? I got to think that doesn't all happen once they get to the room, right?
I can't speak for others, but I've occasionally had somebody call me and say, here's who they're advocating for, or I might have a discussion with the Wood brothers beside a set of tires at a race leading up to that, just to share information and share perspective. But I don't have a lot of, people trying to influence me in advance, going into it. But you do listen to who says what in the room, and we signed some confidentiality agreements. So I could tell you anything I said in the room, but not what others said, because you want to have that transparency in people to feel confident. You'll have some conversation. So we have lunch before we go into the voting room. You'll have that same kind of, well, here's kind of what I'm thinking. And somebody else might say, well, here is a perspective, but I'm trying to look for information to break my tie. When we had 5, most people would go in with about 2 or 3 that they felt like they were going to vote for, and they were looking for information for the others. Now people may go in with 1 at the most, but they're also looking to listen to those veteran folks who had been around and raced with them or covered them, or so there's a lot of listening that goes on, even from folks who have been in the sport for 30 or 40 years.
Mm-hmm. It's really cool. Well, you talk about the people voting in the room, but there's one other vote, Winston, and that anyone who's listening right now or viewing right now has an opportunity to participate in that. Tell us about the fan vote.
Yeah, that's something that's been there since day one. And some halls of fame have a vote just to get fans engaged. Our vote actually counts. So you can go to NASCAR.com or NASCARHall.com as soon as we get off this show and cast your ballot for the 2 people that you would vote for the modern ballot, the 1 person for the pioneer ballot. And that'll stay active until midday on Sunday, May the 18th, leading up to the voting on Tuesday, May the 20th. And the 2 people on the modern ballot that gets the most votes and the 1 on the pioneer ballot, that counts as 1 vote. So there's roughly 67 voters. That's the 68th vote. And it actually counts toward the final count. Now, the accounting firm tabulates all that and we get percentages, but there have been people that have made the Hall of Fame or not by 1 vote. And that fan vote can count. That fan vote counts the same as anybody sitting in that room. So encourage everybody to go to NASCAR.com or NASCARHall.com and cast their ballot for the 2 people on the modern ballot and the 1 on the pioneer ballot they prefer for the class of 2026.
That's really cool stuff. So this is a great time to bring up all these pieces, but for the fans out there, they need to come see the hall because see all the pieces that are already in there, right?
Well, we think so. We've done about 6 new exhibits just since the first of the year, including our new Hall of Honor. We just installed a 75th anniversary for Darlington. One of the things that we will be opening on Friday before the Coca-Cola 600 is an exhibit celebrating the 75 years of the incredible Wood Brothers history. So always new things to see, and things being changed out, as well as all the interactive. So please come see us.
All right. So and real quick, Winston, some key dates here. The fan voting is going to kick off here very shortly. NASCAR.com, NASCARHall.com. Tuesday, May 20th is the actual vote. Do we know when the induction and everything is going to be after that? What else can you tell us?
Yeah, the vote actually on May the 20th. We're the only one that votes and announces at the location where they're going to be inducted on the same day. And fans can see that announcement that afternoon. It'll be about 4 or 5 o'clock. I'm sure it'll be covered on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio, as well as on the Tubi channel of who will go in. And we're finalizing the date, but we're looking to go. This past year, we were in February because there were some scheduling issues, mostly with the convention center being booked where we do the induction. But we're looking at going back into that January timeframe, 3rd or 4th week. I think that's going to be announced for sure on May the 20th. We're just finalizing some things. So that should come out on May the 20th, as long as the tickets will go on sale that day for that January date for the class of 2026.
That's fantastic, Winston. We are so excited. This is such a fun time to be able to celebrate the careers of a lot of people. 20 people we're talking about here, 10 from the modern era, 5 from the pioneer, and 5 on the landmark. Whichever, group of people go in, that's going to be something that we celebrate again. But for right now, to be able to talk about careers that have really helped shape our sport, one of the things I truly love among the many about the NASCAR Hall of Fame. So thanks for coming on today and sharing that with us.